You gotta hear this. Way back in 1620, the great thinker Francis Bacon said that only three things truly changed the world: the compass, gunpowder, and the printing press. I mean, think about that. He put a machine that makes books right up there with stuff that redrew the maps and totally redefined war. And you know what? He was absolutely right.
So that's the big question, right? How on earth did a simple machine for making books end up changing, well, everything? Because the printing press wasn't just some clever invention. It was the spark. It lit the fuse for revolutions in religion, science, and politics. It was, and this is the key, the very first mass communication technology.
To really get how huge this was, you have to kind of time travel with me. We need to picture the world before print. A world where information was incredibly rare, super precious, and controlled by a tiny, tiny group of people. I mean, literally. Information moved as fast as a person could write. Every single book, every document had to be copied out by hand. A scribe, usually a monk, might spend an entire year just to make one copy of the Bible. So for most people, they lived their whole lives in a world of spoken words because there was nothing for them to read, even if they knew how. And when you put it side by side like this, wow, the difference is just staggering. You go from this incredibly slow, manual process where mistakes were common to a machine that's fast, accurate, and way cheaper. This wasn't just a small step up. It was a total game changer. It flipped the world from information scarcity to potential information abundance. And the guy at the center of all this, he was a German goldsmith named Johannes Gutenberg, and he had this wild idea for what he called mechanical writing. Okay, so a little history here, because this is really important. The basic idea of printing wasn't new. Woodblock printing, even movable type, had been around in Asia for centuries. But what Gutenberg did in the 1440s was different. He took all these separate ideas and combined them into a powerful, mechanized system that was perfect for the European alphabet. So how did this thing actually work? Well, it was like this brilliant, low-tech assembly line. First, you'd arrange these little metal letters to spell out a whole page. Then you'd use these inky pads made of sheepskin to get the ink on there. And finally, this was the genius part, you'd use a screw press, the same kind they used for making wine, to stamp the page. So simple, but it changed the world forever. And his masterpiece, the Gutenberg Bible, just shows you the insane power of this new reality. To get 200 Bibles, a single scribe would have had to work for 200 years. Gutenberg's press did it in 3. And the craziest part? He never really saw the massive impact of what he'd created. He actually died poor. But it was too late. The revolution was already on its way. And the first massive explosion that this new technology fueled, that would be the Protestant Reformation. All right, so picture this. It's 1517, and a German monk named Martin Luther has a few problems with the Catholic Church. Actually, he had 95 problems. He wrote them all down in this document that we now call the 95 Theses, and he basically nailed them to a church door, challenging the highest religious authority in the world. And this is the key, right? Luther wasn't the first person to have these ideas. Others had tried before, but their handwritten notes were easily suppressed and destroyed. But Luther had the printing press. His ideas were printed and reprinted and spread all across Europe in a matter of weeks. His 95 Theses literally went viral. And I mean, just look at these numbers. It is wild. For almost a decade, about a third of all books sold in Germany were written by Martin Luther. The printing press made him the world's very first best-selling author. And it turned what could have been a local argument into a revolution that split a continent. So Luther basically showed the world that a printing press could take on the most powerful institutions on the planet. But the Reformation was just the opening act. This new power to spread ideas was about to set off a whole chain reaction that would completely reshape society. Let's talk about science. Before print, science was kind of this lonely, isolated thing. Scientists worked alone, and their findings got corrupted by sloppy handwriting as they were copied. But the press changed all that. Suddenly you could share data and diagrams perfectly. For the very first time, you had a whole community of scientists across Europe who could build on each other's work. When the church put Galileo under house arrest, it was too late. They could lock up the man, but they couldn't lock up his printed ideas. And of course, once you start questioning religious authority, what's next? Political authority.
The Enlightenment was basically powered by print. Radical ideas about freedom and individual rights from thinkers like John Locke got printed in cheap little pamphlets that anybody could get their hands on. It emboldened people to question everything. The powers that be knew how dangerous this was. In 1663, a printer named John Twynne was executed just for publishing a pamphlet that said maybe kings should answer to the people. But you can't execute an idea. Now, here's a weird one you might not expect. The printing press actually helped create countries. See, before print, Europe was just this jumble of local dialects. But a printer had to choose one dialect to print in to sell the most books. Over time, that one dialect became the official French or the official German. Then they printed dictionaries, which kind of froze the language in place. This shared language, spread through books, gave millions of people a shared identity. And that is the foundation of the modern nation-state. So when you step back and look at all of this together, you realize this isn't just about some old machine. We're talking about the birth of the very first information age. I'll say it again, the printing press was the 15th century internet, period. It was a disruptive technology that totally upended how people created, shared, and consumed information. It broke down monopolies on knowledge and gave a voice to people who never had one before, for good and for bad. There's this really cool concept from a thinker named Jürgen Habermas called the public sphere. He argued that all this printed stuff created a brand new kind of space in society. In places like coffee houses, regular people could get together, read the latest news or pamphlets, and actually debate public issues. And in that space, what mattered wasn't your title or your wealth, but how good your argument was. This was the beginning of modern democracy. But, and this is a really crucial point, we have to be clear about who was in this public sphere. It wasn't for everybody. For the most part, it excluded women, poor people, and people of color. So while it was a huge step towards democracy, the journey was really only just getting started. So in the end, the printing press gave us this incredible double-edged sword. It gave us the scientific revolution, and it gave us religious wars. It spread truth, and it spread propaganda. It created a world flooded with new information, forcing people for the first time to ask, who do I trust? How do I know what's real? And as we live through our own information explosion online, that question feels more urgent than ever, doesn't it?